We're live on Facebook now. Welcome to those of you who may be watching us on Facebook, who will be watching us later on YouTube. I'm getting a lot of good feedback. Please send me comments, questions, things that you would like to know. Today I'm going to be continuing with identification and finishing with an anti-identification technique called external considering. Brian, Ian's coming. Ian's joining us. Brian, how are you doing? How are things in Scottsdale, Arizona?
Things are going really well. Let's see. Aside from picking up the piano, I've been trying to do the morning sitting without your YouTube guidance, which is a lot more difficult. So I'm still using that video, but then I'll do like one morning with the video, then one morning try to do without. You know, kind of just switching back and forth to eventually try to do it 100% on my own.
Yeah. Well, what is difficult to do it when you do it on your own? Where are your stumbling blocks?
I can do the body scan pretty well, but after the body scan where you're breathing in I, exhaling am, inhaling the light, exhaling the foggy waste, and feeling the air into the solar plexus, like all that combined, I kind of get a little bit lost.
Okay. I mean, when Mr. Gurdjieff gave the exercise to his students, it was pre-recording days. He would tell them the exercise and then tell them to go make notes of what they thought he told them, and then to bring the notes back and to correct the notes, and then to take it from there. So they didn't have access to the recordings. I think it helps that we do have the ability to create these recordings so we can keep the exercises fairly consistent, but it's something you should be able to do wherever you are without the recordings, but that's something to strive for, a goal in the future. And Angelica, how are things in Sao Paulo and that beautiful part of the world with the nice sun in the background? And
today I'm preparing vegan cooking for clients tomorrow, and it's a kind of therapy also, to make food and practice the attention, focus.
Focus.
Focus when I cook, and I try to use the Gurdjieff exercise during atividades do cotidiano, day by day, cotidiano.
Yeah. I mean, Mr. Gurdjieff believed that cooks put energy into the food they are preparing.
Yes.
And so, TV shows like Hell's Kitchens, where they're swearing in the kitchen and throwing pots, and then people are paying lots of money to eat that food. I'm kind of going, I don't want to go to those restaurants. You want your food cooked with love. You want that energy of attention put in your food.
This is dangerous sometimes when people cook with hate. Don't know. It's not nice.
Ian, how are you doing? We haven't seen you for a few weeks. You've been in California.
Yeah.
How is the inner work going?
It's going good, I suppose. Much as you can say. I caught up on the meetings that I missed. I caught the last one on YouTube this morning. And the topic of identification and attachment is particularly of interest to me.
Whoops, I don't know. We just seem to have lost your voice, or I have. Okay, Ian, I'm not sure if it's your connection, but we seem to have lost you.
Oh, great. Oh well.
Okay, you're back now.
Okay. Well, I'll keep going. If you lose me again, just carry on.
Okay.
But there's a difference between having this, I guess, identification, to use Gurdjieff terms, and feeling movement in my system, whether that's sensations or it's attached to the present moment around me. There's a movement to it. There's an aliveness to it that the sort of concepts of, oh, I am this way, or this person is this way, or I'm developing more of a distinction between when I have that sort of concept or image blinding me from what's actually happening, versus when I'm able to remember, I can switch out of that into the moment, into something alive. I don't know. I don't feel like my work is doing it justice, but.
Yeah. So, I mean, you actually find yourself in states of and moments of identification, but not as often as you wish. Is that what you seem to be saying?
Well, I mean, wish doesn't really enter into it at this stage, I don't think. I'm just more noticing the taste of difference between the two.
Okay.
I don't know, feeling, however you want to label it.
Okay. That's a very good, just to pick up that taste, that what Mr. Gurdjieff would call tismus of it. It's like grabbing a thread and then pulling on the thread, but first you got to grab it. You've got to get that little taste. And I've experienced that many times, where it's just like a little tag, a little tiny piece, and I just hold on and I just try and keep on developing it and working with it. Karen, I noticed your microphone's muted. How are things in Mexico? How are things with your inner work?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Things are kind of slow. I've been lazy.
Okay.
Trying to maintain physical sensation is my major thing these days, as well as trying to keep the muscles of my face relaxed. I find that very important. I did your hypnotic meditation the other night and really enjoyed that. So thank you.
For those who don't know, I have another YouTube channel called Toronto Hypnotherapist. And with my weekly live group that I meet with on Tuesday nights, I'm starting to record my hypnosis portion at the very end of the evening and then post it to YouTube. It's still experimental. I'm still trying to get the lighting so they can all stay in the dark and the light is on me. But I'm going to be doing that, hopefully posting them every week. So adding more and more to the hypnosis portion, if anyone's interested in the hypnosis. Hisham, how are things with you in Morocco, North Africa?
Yes, everything's fine. I'm keeping at the program I have set myself this week. And I have started reading In Search of the Miraculous again. What I observed is that I am picking up on more nuances in the things in the book. And yes, that things that I haven't observed or remarked in the previous lectures of.
Yeah, it's amazing how you read it. And I mean, I read that book inside out in the 1980s, and I thought I understood that book. But when I left it for 10 years, and then I got back to it in 2001, and it was just amazing how much more information there was in it. I mean, it was my Bible in the 80s. I carried it everywhere. I read it. My copy is so threadbare and beaten up and held together by tape and underlined. And I thought I understood it. But I got back to it 10 years later, after working through a lot of the ideas in my mind, in my head, in my life. And there was a depth and a layer that I didn't even suspect was there within his words. It's an amazing book, particularly the parts in quotation marks with Mr. Gurdjieff's words in it. Just incredible. So what exercise are you doing this week? Are you still doing the opening doors with the right hand and closing them with the left, or vice versa, whatever it was? And
Yes, so I have been making it more complicated. So now it's not only about opening doors, but also clothes. When I put up clothes, or when I put off clothes.
okay.
So I try always to choose a side with which I must put on clothes, the right maybe or the left. It depends on the week. I have to do the reverse when I want to take off my clothes. Also, when I want the first feet, I must with which I must step on the floor when I wake up. So things like that. Also, which hand I must the key when I'm putting it in the door. Which hand I must put it on? Which hand I must take it off? So things, small things like that.
Myself, I've actually found a wonderful exercise. Mr. Gurdjieff says that our perception of colors comes from the instinctive center. So when you see blue, that's part of your instinctual center. It's different from your moving center. And I have two keys, one with yellow and one with blue. And right now, my yellow is my indoor key, my blue is my outdoor key. But when I switch them around, you know, Mr. Gurdjieff talked about a cow coming home from the field and discovering that the barn door is painted red and just not knowing what to do with it. And the working with these keys, it's just like I have this moment where I don't remember. It's not like it's a moving center phenomenon like opening the doors. It always forces me to stop and just take a moment and really think it through. So when I get used to it, I switch it back and forth, and I can't tell you how that messes me up. It's like I don't have a program in me for the instinctive center. It's like, which one is it? Because opening doors and locks and everything is, the moving center. And it forces me every time I come in to stop and think and really to pay attention to myself. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. And as I've mentioned before, and this is something Mr. Gurdjieff also mentioned, what Hisham is doing is wonderful. What everyone is doing is wonderful. They are trying to create their own inner exercises, things within your life where you find that you can work on yourself, setting yourself these little will tasks. And I've talked about the decision exercise and the proper way to set will tasks, to relax your body, go into a deep state, ask your deeper, higher inner self, whatever, if it's appropriate. And if it isn't, don't do it. If it is, do it. Within, the decision exercise. I'll probably get back to that in a future meeting, because just to bring it back up to highlight it again. But to set yourself tasks, little small tasks to increase your awareness, to bring you more into this moment here and now, rather than to just do everything as an automaton, as a machine. Normally we unlock doors, open doors, we step upstairs, we put our clothing on as a machine. We have a program inside of ourselves that we always open the door with the same hand. We always step up into the first step with the same foot. We do all sorts of things through this automatic, habitual process, and we've got to stop doing that. the way to stop being a machine and to become what Mr. Gurdjieff called a man, not in quotation marks, because normal men are in quotation marks, but not in quotation marks. In other words, a real man, a real human, is to stop some of those programs. Now, ultimately, some of those programs are useful. We can't turn the machine off. The machine is our body. It's our self in World 48. So some people believe they should transcend the machine. That's wrong. Mr. Gurdjieff talked about how when the machine is in control, it controls any higher function. What we want to do is move the controls up to higher function so that we control the machine and have more or less mechanical, habitual, automatic sub-programs and routines running in the background, and to bring them into our conscious awareness to, so to speak, harmonize the conscious and the subconscious mind. I'm just going to pull up my my usual, the reason we're doing this, we're seeking transformation in the world. We're not one of those self-abnegating, self-denying paths that want to achieve liberation or moksha or nirvana and want to escape the world. We want to transform ourselves within the world to be of service to the world. So we're doing this work for ourselves. We are doing this work for mankind, and we are doing this work for the earth herself. I wish to be. I can be. I have the right to be. I have the ability to be. I swear to myself that this will never be for my personal profit, but to help others. I wish to be to help others. This is to be understood as a vow. So let's begin by simply focusing our attention on our breath, bringing our awareness to our breath as it flows in and out the tip of our nose. And then bring our awareness, our attention to the journey of the air from our nose into our lungs and back out again. Notice the air as it passes through your nose, nasal cavity, back of mouth, throat, past your vocal cords into your lungs and back out again. Really try to pay attention to this journey that the air takes as you breathe in and then as you breathe out. And then become aware of the muscles involved in breathing. Become aware of your diaphragm, the main engine of breath, your abdominal muscles, the intercostal muscles between your ribs. Aware of the air passing in and out the tip of your nose, the journey of the air from your nose to your lungs, and aware of the movement of the various muscles involved. And then try to become aware of your body breathing. Try to sense your body breathing, sense the flow of air, the movement of muscles, and your whole body. And in a nutshell, this is what they train people to do in Vipassana, the 10-day Buddhist meditation retreats. The first 3 days, you trace the air in and out. The next 6 days, you become aware of the body breathing. And this is the beginning instruction in the Buddha's great discourse on mindfulness. And even though it's not about the Gurdjieff teachings, I would strongly recommend looking up the Buddha's great discourse on mindfulness to see how he teaches this process of mindful awareness. So become aware of your body breathing, become aware of the sensation of your body breathing, the flow of air in and out, the movement of the various muscles, and perhaps your whole body breathing. And then we're going to do the Georgia D self-sensing exercise. So I would like you to direct your attention to your right shoulder. And attention is a product of the prefrontal cortex, the part of the human brain that makes us human, the part of our brain that distinguishes us from all other animals. So, as I've mentioned before, a chimpanzee is unable to direct its attention consciously or voluntarily to its right shoulder because it lacks that advanced part of the brain. Now, bring your attention to your right shoulder. Be aware that your attention is a product of your higher mind, or the prefrontal cortex, the most advanced part of the mammalian brain. And then bring your attention to your right upper arm, your right elbow and the bend behind your right elbow, your right lower arm, the palm of your right hand, your right thumb, index finger, middle finger, fourth finger, baby finger, the top of your right hand, your right wrist, lower arm, and moving back up, elbow, upper arm to your right shoulder. And then become aware of your entire right arm at once. Sense your right arm as one organic whole. And while remaining aware of your right arm, divide your attention and direct another portion of it to your right hip, your right upper leg, your right knee and the bend behind your right knee, your right shin and calf, your right ankle, the heel of your right foot, the sole and instep of your right foot, your right big toe, second toe, middle toe, fourth toe, baby toe, the top of your right foot, and then moving back up your right lower leg, knee, upper leg to your right hip. And become aware of your whole right leg as one organic whole, while also remaining aware of your right arm. Aware of your right arm and your right leg. And then, while remaining aware of both of these limbs, again, divide a portion of your attention and become aware of your left hip, your left upper leg, your left knee and the bend behind your left knee, your left lower leg, shin and calf, your left ankle, your left heel, the bottom of your left foot, including your instep, your left baby toe, fourth toe, middle toe, second toe, your left big toe and the top of your left foot, and moving back up your left ankle, lower leg, knee, upper leg to your left hip, and becoming aware of your whole left leg while also remaining aware of your right arm and right leg. Aware of your right arm, right leg, and left leg all at the same time. And hold on to this awareness of these three limbs, and again divide a portion of your attention and become aware of your left shoulder, your left upper arm, your left elbow and the bend behind your left elbow, your left lower arm, your left wrist, the palm of your left hand, your left baby finger, fourth finger, middle finger, index finger, your left thumb, the top of your left hand, and then moving back up your left lower arm, elbow, upper arm, and shoulder. And then become aware of your entire left arm, sensing your entire left arm as one organic whole while also remaining aware of your right arm, right leg, and left leg. Become aware of all four of your limbs. Sense all four limbs while again dividing a portion of your attention and focusing it on the very base of your spine, on your vertebrae sacral number 5. And then move up to sacral number 4, following your vertebrae up, sacral number 3, number 2, number 1, and then crossing the pelvis into your lower back in the lumbar region of your spine, lumbar 5, lumbar 4, lumbar 3, lumbar 2, lumbar 1, and then moving into the thoracic region in your middle back, thoracic 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, moving into your upper back, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then moving into your cervical vertebrae in your neck, cervical 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And you'll hear a little sound, they're vacuuming upstairs, but hopefully it won't be too noticeable. Try to become aware of all 4 limbs and your entire spine. Aware of your right arm, right leg, left arm, and your spine from the bottom all the way to the top. And then, while holding on to this awareness of all 4 limbs and your spine, direct a portion of your attention and become aware of the occipital bone in the very back of your skull. The parietal bones on the sides of your skull, or not the parietal bones, the temporal bones on the sides of your skull, the parietal bone at the top of your skull, and then the frontal bone in the front of your skull just behind your forehead. Aware of all 4 limbs of your spine and all of the plates in your skull. And then direct another portion of your attention into your eye sockets, down to the roof of your mouth, the bone of the roof of your mouth, into your facial bones, your upper teeth and the bones in your upper face, into your jawbone and lower teeth. Aware of all of the bones in your head, while also aware of your limbs and your spine and all of the bones in your head. And while remaining aware of all 4 limbs, your spine, all of the bones in your head, allow a portion of your attention to move inside your mouth to your tongue, then down inside your throat, then down into your chest and across your whole chest, then down into your midriff, your solar plexus, then down into your abdomen, your pelvis, and finishing with your reproductive organs. Aware of your whole body, all 4 limbs, your spine, the bones in your skull, the inside of your mouth, throat, chest, solar plexus, abdomen, pelvis, to your reproductive organs. And try to become aware of the sensation of self. Try to become aware of your body as one organic whole. Sensing your whole body, sensing your body breathing, aware of that flow of air in through your nose to your lungs and back out. Aware of the various muscles involved in breathing. Aware of your whole body. And then I would like you to return your awareness to your right arm. And I'm going to diverge from the exercise as given by George Adi. And I'm going to tap into an exercise that was given by another of Mr. Gurdjieff's students, Willem Nyland. So become aware of your right arm. Become aware of your entire right arm, your right arm as one organic whole. Then allow your attention to rest and become aware of your right leg, your entire right leg as one organic whole. And then allow your attention to rest and become aware of your left leg, your entire left leg as one organic whole. And then allow your attention to rest and become aware of your left arm, your entire left arm. And we're going to circle around the solar plexus. Willem Nyland said that this was an exercise to allow our solar plexus to begin to receive higher hydrogens. So become aware of your right arm, your right leg, your left leg, your left arm, your right arm, your right leg, your left leg, your left arm, your right arm, your right leg, your left leg, and your left arm. And now I would like you to try to do this in conjunction with your breath. And this is going into an exercise Mr. Gurdjieff gave about the limbs. And this is where it gets slightly tricky, because you breathe into one limb and then you breathe out another. So let's begin by breathing into the right arm and then breathing out the right leg. Then breathing into the right leg and breathing out the left leg. And then breathing into the left leg and breathing out the left arm and breathing in to the left arm and breathing out the right arm, breathing into the right arm, breathing out into the left leg, breathing into the left leg and breathing out, or the right leg and breathing out the left leg, breathing into the left leg, breathing out the left arm, breathing into the left arm, breathing out the right arm, breathing into the right arm, breathing out the right leg, breathing in to the right leg, breathing out the left leg, breathing into the left leg, breathing out the left arm, breathing in to the left arm, and breathing out the right arm. And now we're going to try and add another level of complexity, because as you breathe into the right arm, say the word I, and then as you breathe out the right leg, say the word am. Breathing into the right leg with the word I, breathing the word out into the left, am into the left leg, breathing the word I into the left leg, and breathing the word am out the left arm, breathing the word I into the left arm, breathing the word am out the right arm, breathing the word I into the right arm, breathing the word am out into the left leg, breathing the word I, right leg into the right leg, and breathing the word am out the left leg. And just try to continue this on your own. It's actually slightly difficult to narrate. Breathing in the limb, the one limb, and then breathing out the following in the sequence, and then breathing in that limb, breathing out the next limb in the sequence, breathing in the word I, and breathing out the word am. Let's just do this for a minute. And then just allow your attention to rest. This is a very complex exercise. It requires focusing of our attention. And when my head brain gets involved and I start thinking, that's when I lose the ability to narrate it. Trying to do it in myself and narrate it can be a little difficult, so my apologies. Let's just finish with the collected state exercise. As the earth is surrounded by an atmosphere, so too are we surrounded by an atmosphere. Our atmosphere is normally dispersed. If we're identified with something, our atmosphere goes in that direction. If we think of someone, our atmosphere goes in the direction where they are. Our atmosphere is usually not contained around us. We upset it with our thoughts, with our sensations, with our feelings. So draw your atmosphere into you. Collect it. Perhaps a meter, meter and a half around your body. Become aware of the border of your atmosphere. Keep the inside tranquil, still, calm, serene. And in a moment, when I count from 1 to 3 and get to 3, breathe your atmosphere in, and as you breathe out, imagine something remains. Imagine emanations that were contained in your atmosphere remain inside your body and settle inside your body. 1, 2, 3. Breathe your atmosphere in, and as you breathe out, imagine something remains. And then silently repeat after me. May results from this exercise be transubstantiated within me. For my being. And then just slowly return, slowly come back. And I realized as I was saying that exercise that I really need to record this one because of the complexity of it, especially breathing in and out of the limbs, and it gets even more complex. The ability to breathe sensation in and feeling out, and to move around the body, to get more and more and more complex in this exercise. Willem Nyland said that when we, go from our right arm to our right leg, to our left leg, to our left arm, and we circle around with our awareness. It's like, he didn't use the word, but it's like we create this vortex around our solar plexus that allows us to feed off higher hydrogens. And the breathing exercise that we've done in the past, breathing in and imagine feeling flowing into our solar plexus, breathing out, is the way that we acquire the higher hydrogens necessary for the development of the octave of air. The higher has to be present within us to meet with the lower or to connect with the lower in order to meet or blend into the middle. And we don't have those higher hydrogens normally within us. A normal human being doesn't have them. And we breathe them in through doing this inner work. So the morning sitting really focuses on that dimension. It's a very important exercise. I recommend people learn how to do it. If you're watching this on Facebook, it's going to be part of the description. If you're watching this on YouTube, it will also be part of the description posted below, how to access that recording and to begin to practice it, to breathe in those higher hydrogens through conscious breathing through that exercise so that your octave of air can properly develop and you can begin to slowly over time transform your being. Any questions on or comments or anything you'd like to add on the exercise? Any awarenesses? Was it difficult, hard, easy? Comments? You don't have to make any comments, but does anyone have any comments? Ian?
Yeah, I guess just a comment. I noticed it's very easy to circle through the limbs, and sort of as I was doing it, I noticed more and more a sense of joy coming from each limb as my attention went to it. It felt as if that particular part of my body was quite happy
Yeah.
for the way
He's aware of us.
yeah. Like there was this like, oh, you're like something higher is here. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to put too many words on it, but there was definitely some kind of a feeling that arose beyond just the sensation of the limbs.
Well, that's good. Any other comments on that, or shall we move to the next portion, continuing with identification? And as Mr. Gurdjieff said, identification is the enemy of self-remembering. And as I mentioned last week, it was one of the first things I was taught when I joined a Bennett group back in 2006. And I had already been a student of the Gurdjieff teachings in a couple of non-lineage groups before then. But that was my first experience with a lineage group. And one of the first things I was told was, oh yeah, identification steals the energy of self-remembering. It works with the same energy. And so we can either use that energy on identification or we can use it on self-remembering. It's actually easier to fall down than it is to get up, so it's easier to use it on identification. And this is why identification is such an important topic in these teachings. And it's actually, I was amazed when I went to look back at the source material, like In Search of the Miraculous and Views from the Real World and Gurdjieff's early talks, 1914 to 1931, how little information there really was on identification, on such an important topic. But when we are not in the picture, when we are not a part of our observations, we are in a state of identification. So this awareness of our physical body as one organic whole is one of the antidotes to being stuck in that state of identification, to be aware of myself perceiving, to be aware of myself hearing, to be aware of myself talking, not to get caught up in what I'm focused on. Because when we get caught up in what we're focused on, we enter into this state of identification and we lose ourselves. So we're not part of the observation. Go to a movie theater and go to one of those suspenseful action movies with, you know, the shoot 'em ups and the car chases. And during a particularly dramatic moment in the movie, turn and look around at everyone around you, and they will be in a state of absolute identification. They won't be there. They're not in their seats. They are what is going on the screen. That has just absorbed their full attention, and they're no longer present in the moment. They are completely caught up in this process of identification. So the first freedom, or one of the first main freedoms in this work, is the freedom from identification, as I talked about quoting Mr. Gurdjieff last week. This ability to not be so identified with what we are focusing our attention on. And I mentioned that, World 24, Hydrogen 24, J.G. Bennett labeled it sensitive energy. I don't like that term because sensation and there's too much confusion. My own preferred term is the energy of identity. And we can either focus that energy on something real, such as our body, or we can focus it on something unreal. And when we focus it on something unreal, it is like creating sand castles in the sky. So when we focus it on our name, on our language, on anything, within us that's connected with our personality, which is what's false within us as opposed to what is real, we are not using this energy to create our inner body. We're dispersing it. We're wasting it. So understanding this area, this topic of identification, catching ourselves in states of identification is extremely important. And this misuse of this energy of identity is what fuels tribalism. It fuels nationalism. We're beginning to see in various parts of the world, particularly in America and in Britain, there's a lot of hatred that's coming out. There's a lot of identification on a person's race. There's a lot of identification on a person's sex. So a lot of men are getting very upset at the equality movement because they feel that they're being marginalized. And what they're doing is they're misusing this energy of identification on something that is really ultimately unreal, on something that is merely a part of their personality and not who they are at the real inner core. At the real inner core, there is, neither man nor woman, Englishman or Jew or Christian. I forget the exact quote of something that I posted on Facebook this week from Mr. Gurdjieff, but it's a riff on St. Paul, that there's neither man nor woman, slave nor free man, all are one in Christ Jesus. That's St. Paul. Mr. Gurdjieff said, I believe that there's neither Christian nor Jew, Russian nor Englishman. There is only, we are united in our attempt to be. And I'm completely misquoting that. But people get caught up in the labels. They get caught up in the identification, and they identify themselves with their labels. They identify themselves with their sports teams. I once worked in a building in the corner of, in Toronto, Yonge and Dundas. And it was fairly close to the Air Canada Centre where hockey games would be played. And I would sometimes be there in the evening, and I could tell just by the crowds that started streaming past whether the Toronto Maple Leafs had won or lost. People were so identified with the results of their local sports team. They would wear the jerseys, they would have the caps. I could even imagine them with Toronto Maple Leaf pillow slips and sheets and, on their walls like little children. And it's something that little children do. I remember once when I was living in England, it was a friend's birthday, and he came over and he had these cards and he put them on the table in front of himself, almost like a little shrine to the people who had said happy birthday to him. And he was so identified. I didn't tell him that he was identified, but just the way he did it, the reverence he had, that he was just projecting this energy of identity onto these cards. And this man had a PhD. He was what we would call a professor here in North America, but a senior lecturer in England, very, very intelligent. But, he was behaving like a child, so identified with these little messages. And it's this energy of identity that we've got to redirect to what is real, redirect to the process of self-remembering. Now I'm going to bring up some more quotes. So this is Mr. Gurdjieff. This is in, I mixed up one of my quotes last week. It actually came from In Search of the Miraculous. This one comes from Views from the Real World. The same things are in a child and in a grown-up man. The only difference between a child and a grown-up man is in the mind. All the weaknesses are there, beginning with hunger, with sensitivity, with naivety. There is no difference. The same things are in a child and in a grown-up man. Love, hate, everything. Functions are the same. Receptivity is the same. Equally they react, equally they are given to imaginary fears. In short, there is no difference. The only difference is in the mind. We have more material, more logic than a child. Now again, as an example, A looked at me and called me a fool. I lost my temper and went for him. A child does the same thing. But a grown-up man who will be just as angry will not hit him. He will restrain himself. For if he does hit him, the police will come, and he is afraid of what other people will think. They will say, "What an uncontrolled man," or refrain for fear he will run away from me tomorrow, and I need him for my work. In short, there are thousands of thoughts that may stop me or fail to stop me, but still, these thoughts will be there. A child has no logic, no material, and because of that, his mind is only function. His mind will not stop to think. With him, it will be it thinks. But this it thinks will be colored with hate, which means identification. There are no definite degrees between children and adults. Length of life does not mean maturity. A man may live to 100 and yet remain a child. He may grow tall and be a child all the same. If we mean by a child one who has no independent logic in his mind. A man can be called grown up only from the moment his mind has acquired this quality. So from this point of view, it can be said that the Institute is only for grown-up people. As an aside, this is Mr. Gurdjieff's Institute for the Harmonic Development of Man at the Prieuré in France. Only a grown-up person can derive profit from it. A boy or girl of 8 can be grown up, and a man of 60 can be a child. The Institute cannot make people grow up, make people grown up. They have to be grown up before they come to the Institute. Those who are in the Institute must be grown up, and by this I mean grown up not in their essence, but in their mind. So unpacking this, we can see the first step in learning how to stop identifying. And the first step is to not identify with what is going on in our mind. People talked to Mr. Gurdjieff, they'd gone to the East and they talked about, finding that stillness within the mind and getting that absolute silence. And Mr. Gurdjieff told them that that was a ridiculous quest, that there's a part of the mind, the associative part of the mind always associates, and those associations will go on all the time. And the aim is, rather than to have those associations active, to turn them passive, to put them sort of in the back. They will still be operational, and to become aware of a different part. So the idea of silencing the mind is like trying to stop breathing. Breathing is a function. Our lungs serve a function. The associative mind is a function. But what we want to do is, rather than be controlled by these functions, we want to control these functions. So the first step in dealing with identification, in trying to learn to control it, begins with the mind, and to stop identifying with our thoughts. And then he talks about, the thinking will be colored with hate, because not only are there mental forms of identification, there are also emotional forms of identification. But to become aware that it is thinking within you, to become aware that your mind is a function. You are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are merely a function within you. And if you think you are your thoughts, if you are like Descartes, I think, therefore I am, you will get so lost in the identification process. You will begin to think that you are your ideas, that your ideas represent you, that what you think is the highest dimension of your being, and you will go down the proverbial rabbit hole. So just begin by becoming aware that the thoughts that circle around in your mind are not you. They are a function of you. They are a function of you, but they are not you. And there are higher thoughts, which are not you, and then there are associative thoughts. And the associative thoughts are the thoughts that begin looping around within our brain from the moment we wake up to the moment we go to sleep. We can't control that. Like I said, the lungs have to breathe. The associative mind associates. What we have to do is to stop identifying ourselves with those associations. We have to start viewing what goes on in our mind as it thinks. It is thinking these thoughts. It is making these associations, to begin to put a little wedge in and expand that wedge however we can. So try to do this. Try to engage in this exercise. Try to become aware of the thoughts in your mind, but be aware that you are not those thoughts. Take that little bit of an inward step back. Mr. Gurdjieff's separation of the self from the self, to become aware that your mind, that your intellect, that the words and everything up in your head brain is really it. It's like a machine operating, and you are not those thoughts. You are not those words. You are not those ideas. They are your thoughts, your words, your ideas, but not you. They are a function of you, and they are a function of your mind. This one also, I believe this comes from, let me just, we'll get to it at the end. Fear's identification, a fragment, a centuki. So this bit here came from one of Mr. Gurdjieff's students. Actually, I believe this is Gurdjieff's early talks, 1914 to 1931. And when they were in Sentuki, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, this was in the middle of the Russian Revolution. They kept on moving further and further away, but the Russian Revolution was consuming the country with the White Russians and the Bolsheviks and the wars and everything that was going on. So, you know, that's the milieu that he was talking about this. Sometimes a man is revolving thoughts which return again and again to the same thing, the same unpleasantness which he anticipates, which not only will not happen, but cannot happen in reality. The forebodings of future unpleasantness, illnesses, losses, awkward situations often get hold of a man to such an extent that they actually become waking dreams. People cease to see and hear what actually happens, and if someone succeeds in proving to them that their forebodings and fears were unfounded in some particular instance, they even feel a certain disappointment, as though they were thus deprived of a pleasant expectation. Very often, a man leading a cultured life in cultured surroundings does not realize how big a role fears play in his life. He is afraid of everything. Afraid of his servants, afraid of the children, afraid of his neighbor, the porter in the entrance hall, the man selling newspapers around the corner, the cab driver, the shop assistant, a friend he has seen in the street, whom he tries to pass unobtrusively so as not to be noticed, and in their turn, the children, the servants, the hall porter, etc., are afraid of him. And this is so in ordinary, normal times, but at such times as we are going through now, the Russian Revolution, this all-pervading fear becomes clearly visible. And as an aside, it's becoming clearly visible in the United States. It's becoming clearly visible in the United Kingdom, in England and Scotland, Ireland, and it's becoming visible in Western Europe. This fear of the other, this fear is, just taking hold of people, and they're becoming so identified with it. And like the fish in water, they're not able to see and relate to it properly. They're not able to detach from it, to disidentify from it. It is no exaggeration to say that a great part of the events of the last year are based on fear and are the result of fear. Unconscious fear is a very characteristic feature of sleep. Man is possessed by all that surrounds him because he can never look sufficiently objectively on his relationship to his surroundings. This is a definition of non-identification. So to look sufficiently objectively on our relationship to our surroundings is to be non-identified. He can never stand aside and look at himself together with whatever attracts or repels him at the moment. And because of this inability, he is identified with everything. This too is a feature of sleep. You begin a conversation with someone with the definite aim of getting some information from him. To attain this aim, you must never cease to watch yourself, to remember what you think. So this ability to self-sense, to be aware of ourself, is so essential to the process of non-identification, this inward separation. To attain this aim, you must never cease to watch yourself, to remember what you want, to stand aside and look on yourself and the man you are talking to. But you cannot do it. 9 times out of 10, you will become identified with the conversation. And instead of getting the information you want, you will yourself tell him things you had no intention of telling. People have no idea how much they are carried away. So this is a really, really important passage. We can never look objectively on our relationships with our surroundings. We can never stand aside and look at ourselves and whatever attracts or repels ourselves at the moment. And so this is the goal, to make sure that whatever is going on, that we are not just aware of the person we're focusing on, but that we are holding ourselves and an awareness of ourselves in the picture. And it is, this is a feature of sleep, especially this emotional fear. And here, he also gives another exercise obliquely in conversation with people, especially someone that you would like something from. That grasping self that wants the identification with what we want takes over. And even though we go into the conversation thinking that we want a specific outcome, he said 9 times out of 10, you'll become identified with the conversation. So again, there's another profound inner exercise in this. My mouse just fell over. The awareness of yourself in a conversation, particularly in a conversation where you want to achieve something, where you have an aim, a goal. And an aim and a goal are very important as well. I've talked about this in previous meetings. If you accidentally do something, you can't say that you did it. It was an accident. But if you aim to do that, if you set it as your goal, set it as a mini goal, and you do it, you can set to have been doing in the Gurdjieffian sense of the word. So try to find a conversation this week, if you can, with someone, and where you would like to achieve a certain kind of outcome. And then watch yourself as much as you can. And afterwards, if you got lost, don't beat yourself up that you got lost. Try to analyze the conversation. Try to rewind it, if you can, to that point where you got lost. Try to see where that state of identification overwhelmed you. And try it again if you have the opportunity. If you work with people and you have to try to sell them on ideas or whatever, try to separate yourself from the conversation, to disidentify with that conversation. Try to do this wherever you are. So this comes from views from the real world. If you remember the example I gave you of identification, you will see how blind a man is when he identifies with his moods, feelings, and thoughts. So again, this is something to pay attention to. Become aware of how, when you're angry or you're upset or you're frustrated, how you become so identified with those emotions that you become those emotions and you can't shake them off. Another exercise is to become aware of other people experiencing these emotions, to become aware of how someone becomes frustration. One of the ladies of the rope used to get into these states, and Mr. Gurdjieff told the other woman in the rope that, you know, you've got to let her state wind down. You can't knock her out of it, that these states have to come to their natural conclusion. And watch that, observe that. See how when someone is upset, they hold on to that upsetness. They are identified with that upsetness, and you can say, don't be upset, you know, look at things objectively, calm down, breathe, and they just can't let it go. How they become so identified with their mood, with their feeling, with their thoughts. And then turn this on yourself and try to notice how you do the same thing. And notice how these moods, these feelings, these thoughts have a life of their own, and you've got to digest the experience before you're able to let go of them. But it's a wonderful opportunity to observe ourselves, even if it's only after the fact, to see how caught up and how identified we are with our emotions. So we can be identified with our thoughts, with the thinking in our brain, oh, this is a brilliant idea of mine, and oh, I wish I had thought of this sooner. It's not my idea. It is what my mind is thinking. It's maybe a brilliant idea of my mind. Hey, I may have wished my mind thought it sooner, but that inward separation from our thoughts and that inward separation from our feelings, these are the two primary places where we get identified, with thoughts and with feelings. So it thinks, it is thinking this thought, it is having these associations. And to be aware of your feelings, particularly that pull your feelings have. When they get to a certain intensity, you lose any sense of objectivity. You lose any sense of inward separation from your feelings. You become your feelings. You get so identified with that anger or that hurt or that frustration or that jealousy or that negative feeling, often caused by an accumulation of corresponding energies. He, Mr. Gurdjieff, said that a good deal of our lying, greed, envy, jealousy, and hate is often caused by an accumulation of corresponding energies. Unused energy causes frustration, which is deflected into the expression of negative emotion. Man has real individuality inherent in him. It is his birthright, which he has sold for the mess of pottage of false personality. And here he's obliquely referring to Jacob and Esau, and how Jacob was making this lentil stew, and Esau came in, and for the lentil stew to eat, he sold his birthright to Jacob in the Old Testament in the Bible. Identification occurs when our energy and attention is fixed on one aspect of a thing. It is one-centered work, a form of hypnosis, and must be distinguished from concentration and attention, which are useful and necessary. Here is another really important key to understanding identification. It is one-centered work. When we link our mind and our feelings, and our feeling brain does what it's designed to do, and our head brain does what it's designed to do, we step out of that state of identification. But we either get identified with our thoughts, with the ideas in our head, we think we are these ideas, we think we are the words, or we get identified with our feelings, with those negative feelings. And so another key to understanding identification is it is one-centered. And then going back here, he talks about how negative emotions, not always, but often are a result of unused energy. Unused energy causes frustration, which is deflected into the expression of negative emotion. This energy, the energy that should be devoted to self-remembering, which should be devoted first to the awareness of our body as one organic whole, and then putting ourselves in our observations of what is going on around us. This energy gets deflected, and it gets stolen and used and turns into negative emotions. Mr. Gurdjieff says that we accumulate enough energy to do a lot of inner work we need to do throughout the day, but we quickly expend this energy in unproductive ways, primarily through the process of identification and identification of negative emotions. So negative emotions are always, when they are wrong within us, they're always a form of identification. The ego is always hidden beneath them. Negative emotions, certain forms of fear can be precognitive awarenesses, but that accounts for something like 0.0001%, figure off my head, of negative emotions. Normally, it's one of the ways we waste and use up all of the accumulated energy that we've accumulated at night in our sleep. And so our frustration and our anger and our annoyance, it just steals this energy. And it's an energy that we should have been using to promote what's real within ourselves, our body, to begin to separate the self from the self. This comes from C.S. Knox, the teachings of Gurdjieff, A People's Journey, Observe, Know, Control. Wednesday, 8th of February, 1922. Consideration. Do not consider within, but without. Try and be indifferent within, but otherwise without. Show sympathy, not merely when we feel, but when we choose and ought. Create force by ruling feelings. Create obstacles for machine. Automatic obstacles insufficient for non-identification. So a machine, and at the level of a machine, we are not able to set tasks and to create things. We have to step up to the level of man, natural man. We've got to step up beyond that level of machine and then create obstacles for our machine. And here he actually leads us into the concept of consideration. I talked a little bit about this last week in terms of the quotes. There are two forms of considering. One is internal considering, and the other's external considering. Internal considering is a form of identification. Oh, look at how they looked at me, and I can't believe it's raining on me. And why did that have to happen to me, to me? And we're identified with how unjust the world is to us, how they slammed the door in our face, how we didn't have enough money to buy coffee that morning, and, you know, all these thousands and thousands of petty grievances. And so consideration, internal considering is the enemy. And there are two forms of internal considering. We can think of one as plus and the other as minus. The plus is thinking that they didn't consider us enough and they should have smiled and they should have recognized the brilliance of our idea or whatever. And the negative is where we think we didn't consider another person enough. Oh my God, I forgot to shake their hand. I forgot to look them in the eye. They're going to hate me. Oh, you know, I didn't do this for them. I didn't do that for them. And in another place, he called people like that jump up people. You know, they're always, you know, someone walks in the room and they jump up and they're really, really trying. They're engaged in denying themselves and putting their focus on the other person. And I talked about last week how in the last grade in high school, I remember walking by someone that I wanted to really be my friend. And I didn't pay attention until after I had passed. And I was thinking, oh, they're going to hate me. They're not going to talk to me. They're going to think that I was aloof and standoffish. And I had these, you know, 1,000 different thoughts and feelings. And it was, you know, the negative aspect of internal considering. So, you know, here, show sympathy not merely when we feel, but when we choose and ought. And this leads us into understanding external considering, choosing to externally consider, choosing to focus on the other person, really putting them first, trying to make their life more tolerable, more pleasing, easier. I'm going to run out of time, so maybe I'll save this for the next meeting. I don't have a lot of quotes on it. Let me just see if I have any more quotes. No. I don't have a lot of quotes on external considering. Mr. Gurdjieff didn't talk about it that much. But as a hypnotherapist, I've been trained in neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. A lot of that is wonderful exercises in externally considering another person, in really paying attention to another person. And I'll go into detail in the next meeting, but external considering is one of the ways out. Another is to stop identifying with our feelings, with our thoughts, to create that separation of the self from the self, to realize that my mind, that my thoughts, that my ideas are not me, that it thinks it is having these ideas, it is having these thoughts, to not get caught up and to take ownership of my thoughts, to recognize that my thoughts are a function. They are not me. Some people like, I've got the best idea in the world and it's brilliant and I'm brilliant and it's unbelievable, and they take credit for this function that occurs in their mind. So to learn how to step back and think, it thinks. Oh, it is thinking this thought, or oh, it is thinking that thought, rather than, oh, I'm so brilliant, or I can't believe I didn't think about this before. You can even say, oh, it is brilliant. I can't believe it didn't think this before. Creating that little wedge that we can expand slowly into this crack that we can make, separating the self from the self. And within our emotions. When the next time you're frustrated or raging or angry or upset, realize that you will be in a state of deep identification, and that it will be incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to get out of that state of identification, even if a little light flashes on inside you and you realize it. It will have to run its course. It's like a spring that will have to wind down. And we can accelerate that winding down. We can digest it easier, but pay attention to it and try to become aware of that moment when you lost yourself, when you were so pulled into that situation that you forgot yourself, that you weren't able to see yourself in the situation, that it just took you over. These are all aspects of identification. And so to think of the mind as a function, even to think of our feelings as a function, and then to recognize that perhaps the anger you felt, that outburst, or that frustration, or that annoyance arose as a misuse of certain energy, particularly C12, and that when you woke up that morning, you had enough energy to engage in inner work, but that is where you lost it. And then to try, and at the beginning, you stick a little wedge in and try to regain control of yourself, to try to expand that wedge so that you separate more from your thoughts, more from your feelings. So are there any questions, any things that you would, like to ask me about this topic? And, next week, I'm going to go through what I understand in terms of NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Program. It's actually an advanced form of communication, a way of communicating with people. And part of it is focusing on what you say, on how you say it, and the awareness of yourself. And part of it is focused on learning how to really observe the other person. So when I studied NLP and when I began to really internalize it, I thought this is a profound technique for external considering, a way of separating ourselves from the conversation, becoming aware of the reaction that other people have to our words, to our body language, to the way we're holding ourselves, to the way we're breathing. So I'll go into that in fairly great detail next week. But are there any questions now?
I guess I have a quick question.
Okay.
I'm not really exactly sure how to ask it though, but with creative, like let's say if an artist is doing artwork, you're saying to not, that's still a function of the mind?
Or the emotions.
Okay.
But there's the need to kind of inwardly separate yourself. You are not creating. It is creating. There was a writer, a novelist, one of the women of the rope. And Mr. Gurdjieff was talking about a certain state, a certain experience. And she said that when she sat down at the typewriter, she went into this incredible state where I guess characters and things and this is what he was talking about. And he said, no. He actually put her down and said that, it was not what she was doing, that she was just caught up in that pure state of identification with what's going on in her mind and her characters. And he didn't say it, and it's not in the transcripts, but she should have tried to become aware of herself, forming these characters, forming these words. It's very hard when you're writing dialogue and you're trying to write a story to disidentify from that moment, from the story. And I'm not a visual artist. I don't know how easy it may be to create art from the real eye. from that higher self, or if you get pulled into it. Now we've got two artists here, but I don't want to put them on the spot and ask them about the creative process. But it's that separation, to be aware of yourself. I am not my thoughts. And I'm also not my body. And I'm not my feelings. They are my instruments. I can become aware of my thoughts. I can inwardly detach from my thoughts and see my thoughts. I can become aware of my body. I can inwardly detach from my body and observe my body as one organic whole. And I can also become aware of my feelings. That is, to inwardly detach from my feelings and observe my feelings. A lot of people think they are their thoughts. They think they are their body. They believe they are their feelings. They live on the surface of life. They have no inward development. They think they're their ideas. They think they're their physical accomplishments. They think they are what they feel. And we have to separate from that. In Eastern traditions, they talk about the witness, the observer, consciousness itself. And sort of letting the cat out of the bag, the witness, the observer, is the real I. Right now, for most people, control of themselves is the self in World 48. It's the man-machine. They are identified with their thoughts, with their sensations, with their body, with their feelings. The first step is the step up from identification into the state of non-identification. This is stepping up into World 24. I've used an analogy many times with clients of mine when talking about mindfulness. It's like having a flashlight and shining the flashlight on your hand. At first, you really become mindful, personally conscious of your hand. But after a while, after you develop this ability, you begin to wonder where the light is coming from. And the light is coming from the real I. And the real I is also something that needs to be grown. It needs to be developed. So inherent within every act of self-observation, inherent within every act of self-remembering is the real I, but it's normally hidden. I can't see my hand behind my head, but it's still there. The higher is still there. And we've got to bring it down into our awareness, or really move our awareness up to that higher level. Mr. Gurdjieff, in Search of the Miraculous, talked about, the four bodies. And normally it's the bottom that controls everything. That's the self, the physical body, our brain, our physical body, the emotions in our body. And when we move up one level, we get control over our physical body. And the more we move up, the more the control comes from above. It doesn't mean we lose our physical body. We're not like a Saturn V rocket that, we drop the lower end and we move into the higher, and then we drop that and we move into the next. We are embodied beings. But what we're doing is we're learning to move control up to the higher realms. And part of this is actually growing our being at the inner level. So growing a Kesdjan body, growing a higher being body. These are not ours by birth. They are not fully developed at birth. We have to grow them. So these people who say, meditate and become aware of the, the self beyond self, as far as I'm concerned, they're talking through the side of their mouth, and they are talking about a knowledge which they don't possess. And I've had many of them come to certain meetups of mine, and I've challenged them on their assertions, what they say, and there's just a lot of robotic thought in the New Age movement, in the spiritual movement, in the human potential movement. People think they possess these qualities that they don't. You just start yelling at them and you see them get angry and losing control. And this is what Mr. Gurdjieff was trying to show us, that we are not nearly as developed and as evolved as we are. and that the process of evolving is to do these various steps to first achieve that freedom from identification. And to do that, we've got to start disidentifying, but we have to see where we are identifying. At any rate, we're now out of time. I'll continue this next week and give very, very practical examples and ways we can actually begin to learn to externally consider. Thank you all for being here, and to be continued.